My name is Aurelia, and I'm 25 years old. I work in a creative role at a software company here in Florida. From the outside, my life might look easy and well organized, as if I have it all figured out. But if you look closer, things at home are actually pretty complicated. About a year ago, everything changed for my family. My dad's business went bankrupt without any warning. It was a total surprise, and we weren't prepared for it. Since then, I had to move back to my hometown to live with my parents and my younger sister, Amara. Now, my income is the main source of money for our family to survive, so I cover most of our expenses. One evening, we were all sitting together in the living room when my mom suddenly started a conversation about dinner. Aurelia says she wants pork steaks for dinner tomorrow, she announced, glancing over at me. I sighed quietly and said, "Well, we're really running out of money for groceries. We can't even afford to buy pork right now. Can you help a bit more with the food budget?" I frowned as I spoke, feeling the weight of our situation. We're already out of money for food, and it's not even the middle of the month yet. That's when Amara chimed in, sounding annoyed. "Big sis, you're not giving enough money for food," she said, crossing her arms. I was shocked and stared at her, not believing what I just heard. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a bit defensive. "I'm already giving $7,000 a month. That should be more than enough for all of us." Amara just scoffed. "Big sis, prices are higher now. $7,000 isn't enough for a family of four anymore." I felt frustration rising in me and couldn't hold it back any longer. $10,000. If you have a problem with that amount, then why don't you get a job and help pay for the food yourselves? I snapped back. At that moment, my mom jumped into the conversation, immediately taking Amara's side. "It's hard to find a job," she said, sounding sympathetic towards Amara. I feel bad for her. Hearing this made me feel bitter inside. I knew Amara wasn't actually looking for a job. She just used the excuse of job hunting to avoid working. The truth was, she spent most of her time at home, doing nothing productive. On top of that, I'd recently discovered that my mom was secretly giving Amara part of the money I provided as pocket money. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough," I said firmly. "If it's really so hard to manage things here, why don't we sell this house and move back to Grandma's hometown? Maybe we could find work there, and life wouldn't be so tough." But Mom instantly rejected that idea. "No way," she replied, shaking her head. "I'm not going back to that town. My grandma lives in Miami, where she owns a popular Italian restaurant. If we moved there, we could work at her restaurant and we'd at least have free pizza and pasta to eat. It would make things easier for us. But Grandma is very strict, especially about how she makes her pizza, and my mom hates that. She doesn't want to deal with the hard work that comes with working in Grandma's restaurant." Even my dad joined the conversation, saying, "Why are we so quick to run to Grandma for help? We should be taking care of ourselves. Relying on her is just being spoiled." I felt anger bubbling up inside. How could they call me spoiled? I was the one working hard and paying for nearly everything. Meanwhile, my sister didn't even want to work, yet my parents still seemed to take her side in everything. I suggested that Amara could at least try to get a part-time job while searching for something more permanent. After all, she's 23, and many people work part-time to support themselves. But my mom quickly dismissed my suggestion. "No," she argued, "Amara helps around the house, so she doesn't have time for a part-time job." I was confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked, completely baffled. "I've never seen Amara do any housework." My dad then spoke up, trying to defend Amara. "Amara carries the dishes to the sink after meals. She does her own laundry, and sometimes she even gives me shoulder massages." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The housework they mentioned was stuff even a little kid could handle. Meanwhile, I was the one waking up early every morning to make breakfast for the entire family, and I also packed my dad's lunch before leaving for work. On top of that, I managed all the household finances and took care of our taxes. But despite everything I did, my parents still seemed to favor Amara. This wasn't new. They had always treated her better than me, even when we were kids. People often said I was pretty, too, but Amara had always been seen as more graceful and charming. Because of this, Our parents always treated her a bit more specially. Most people would probably think I should just move out and leave all this behind, but it's not that simple. I can't just leave. There are many reasons why I have to stay here, at least for now. So, I continue to live with this stress every single day, feeling like I'm carrying the weight of my entire family on my shoulders. One day, some time passed without me noticing that Amara had actually left the house. I thought she had just gone out like usual, but then a few days went by, and she still hadn't returned. I started to feel suspicious, wondering where she could be. Then, one evening, as I was coming home and walking to my room, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were low, but I caught enough to make me stop and listen. What I heard left me completely shocked. I couldn't wait to see the souvenirs from Louisiana. My sister, Amara, was lucky, enjoying a relaxing trip, spending time on beautiful beaches, and eating at fancy restaurants. Amara's so lucky right now, my mom said with a hint of envy. I'd love to go to Louisiana too. Maybe we should all plan a trip together next time. My dad nodded, adding, that would be nice. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Confused, I asked, wait, what are you talking about? Are you saying Amara is in Louisiana right now? My parents looked at me, a bit surprised by my reaction. Yes, that's right, they both replied. I felt shocked. But how? I asked. She doesn't have any money. I've even been holding back on my own shopping just to save. Oh, Amara won a trip in a sweepstakes, my mom explained with a smile. She's always been lucky with things like that. I was surprised, but decided to let it go. Amara had won a trip, and that seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I tried to accept it. The next day, while I was at work, I received an unexpected call from a credit card company. Since I don't usually use my credit card much, I was curious but not too worried. But when the company told me there had been high charges on my card over the past 4 days, I was shocked. I couldn't remember making any big purchases recently. Feeling a bit anxious, I asked, how much was spent? The customer service agent told me about $17,000 has been charged in the past 4 days. Right away, I had a pretty good idea of what was going on. I knew who was behind it. It had to be Amara. She might have won a free trip for the hotel and flight, but she still needed money for all the extra things, like souvenirs, meals, and other expenses. Determined to find out the truth, I called her immediately. What's going on, Amara? Explain yourself, I demanded, my voice firm. Oh, I'm surprised you called, sis. I thought you'd be waiting for your souvenirs, she joked. Stop messing around, I snapped. You've been using my credit card without asking, haven't you? Amara didn't even seem bothered. Did you notice? It was an accident, she replied casually, and I could feel my anger growing. What were you thinking? I asked, barely holding back my frustration. Using someone else's credit card without permission is a serious offense. Amara laughed lightly. It might be a problem if it was someone else's card, but we're family, Aurelia. You really should brush up on family dynamics, she said, acting as if it was no big deal. How could you spend $17,000 in just 4 days? That's an insane amount of money, I practically shouted. Well, she said as if it were obvious. The flight and hotel might have been free, but I had to pay for all the other things, shopping, fancy meals, and fun activities. I went to some nice restaurants, bought a few branded items, and even took taxis everywhere. Before I knew it, I'd spent over $17,000. Spending that much money is just not okay, Amara. What were you thinking? Why are you so mad? She replied, almost amused by my reaction. I used the card because it was going to expire soon, that's all. Relax, sis. I'll leave the bill to you. Then, without waiting for my response, she hung up, sounding cheerful as ever. I was left speechless, trying to process everything that had just happened. After that call, Amara tried to reach me several times, but I ignored her. She even left a voicemail, saying, I guess I really messed up this time. I was being so foolish. Her tone was so casual that it made me laugh bitterly. She didn't seem to understand how serious this was. Later that evening, when I got home, my parents greeted me warmly. Welcome back, they said, acting like everything was normal. How can you act so calm? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Amara is in a tough spot, my mom added with concern in her voice. Why did you stop the card? My dad asked. Why? I echoed in disbelief. Because she used my card without my permission. As soon as the credit card company called and told me about the charges, I canceled it right away. Apparently, Amara had tried to use the card again after it was blocked, and when it didn't work, she panicked. Frustrated, she tried to reach me, but since I kept ignoring her calls, she went to my parents for help. Your sister's in trouble, stuck in another state, and you're not going to help her, my mom asked, sounding disappointed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? I asked. Just because we're family doesn't mean it's okay to use someone else's credit card to blow $17,000. My mom shook her head, clearly not agreeing. I don't think you should be so heartless, she said, looking at me with disapproval. How can you be so cold? This is why you never get to go on trips. Amara planned to buy us all souvenirs, so what's the big deal? I was stunned, realizing that once again, they were siding with Amara, even though she was clearly in the wrong. I couldn't believe my own family was acting like it was normal to take someone's money without permission. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You two are unbelievable. How can you even think that way? Are you sleep-talking during the day? You're not seeing things clearly at all. Amara's out there, enjoying herself without a single worry, and you still expect me to be thoughtful and understanding. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail my sister had left. Amara's voice came through loud and clear. Make the card usable again, you miser. Mom and Dad's cards are maxed out, and I can't use them. You're so cheap, not even giving me pocket money for this trip. How useless can they be? After hearing Amara's angry message, my parents went silent. The anger they had toward me quickly faded, replaced by shock. They rushed to their room to check on their credit cards. A few minutes later, I heard them shouting in panic. Curious, I went to check on them, and their faces were red with frustration and disbelief. I can't believe Amara used my card without asking, my dad muttered, furious. After everything we've done for her, this is how she repays us? She even took the bank book and all our cards, my mom added, looking hurt. I feel so betrayed. Oh, I replied coldly. Wasn't it supposed to be a kind gesture from Amara to buy you souvenirs? You both said she was thinking of us and trying to have fun for our sake, didn't you? My parents looked down, realizing how wrong they'd been. Yeah, that's what we thought, my mom mumbled, uncertain now. But our money is still safe, right? When I saw how quickly their attitudes changed once they were reassured their money was still secure, I felt disappointed. Well then, I said, raising an eyebrow, why don't you just increase the credit card limit and pay off the balance? Let Amara keep using it for all the souvenirs she's planning to buy you. That's not possible, my mom replied, shaking her head sadly. We don't have any savings left. What are we going to do? Amara stuck out there with no money for food or anything. After a moment of silence, my dad turned to me with a pleading look. Aurelia, please, he said, his voice soft and desperate. We'll start fresh. We promise to work together to support this family. Please help Amara. What are you talking about? I asked sarcastically, a bitter smile on my face. Does that include actually supporting me too? Moved by my dad's words, my mom knelt down in front of me, her face filled with regret. I was stunned for a second, but quickly felt a mix of disbelief and bitterness. I let out a bitter laugh. Isn't it a little late for apologies now? I asked. But my mom continued to plead, her voice filled with sincerity. I swear, I will change. I'll do my best to support everyone from now on. I won't wrong you or Amara ever again. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of the situation. As my parents went back to their room, I pulled out my credit card and stared at it, still unsure of what to do next. In the following days, I came across a credit card with a valid expiration date that hadn't been used yet. I turned to my parents and suggested, why don't you give this card to Amara? And why not take a family trip to Louisiana together? You'll all have a great time. My parents were thrilled with the idea. They immediately contacted Amara, and everyone began making plans for the trip. I even booked their flights online, watching them as they excitedly discussed their upcoming vacation. I smiled, keeping my true intentions to myself. After everything was set, I made a private call to a certain number. 5 days later, when my parents and Amara returned from their trip to Louisiana, Amara greeted me with a big smile. "Big sis, thank you so much for letting us enjoy Louisiana. It's rare for you to come and pick us up. Were you expecting some souvenirs?" "Sorry, I didn't buy anything." It was obvious that they'd all had a fantastic time and had already forgotten to show any real gratitude for my help. Seeing their carefree attitudes, I knew it was time to put my plan into action. I could barely hold back my excitement. "Looks like you all had a lot of fun. Was that the last big moment of your life?" Amara looked at me, puzzled. "What do you mean by last?" "Well," I said casually, "I've decided to sell the house. It's all settled. I've already sent our belongings to a new place, and someone's coming to pick us up." My parents and Amara looked completely shocked. They noticed the "for sale" sign at the entrance of our home, realizing I was serious. What is this? "Did you really sell the house?" they demanded, their faces pale with shock. Facing their astonished expressions, I explained further. "Actually, a real estate agent has already. I had a friend from university who'd been interested in buying this house and the land for a while. Every time they asked, I always said no, thinking it was best to keep the house in the family. But recently, I changed my mind. I realized that selling the house and living on my own would give me the freedom I'd been craving, both financially and mentally." My parents were outraged. "You can't just sell the house on your own. That's illegal," my mom protested. "This house belongs to your dad, not you." I stayed calm and replied, "Oh, I see you're pretty upset. But what if I told you the house and land are actually in my names?" They both stared at me in disbelief.
"What?
"How is that possible?" they exclaimed. "Dad, do you remember when you couldn't pay the taxes a few years ago and came to me for help?" I asked. "I agreed to pay, but only on one condition, that the house's ownership be changed to my name. You signed the papers back then, remember?" My dad's face fell as he recalled that moment. That's right," he muttered, realizing I was right. I continued, "I didn't leave this house all this time because it was already in my name. I was just waiting for the right opportunity to move you all out so I could sell it. It was hard to find the right time since you were always around. But with you all in Louisiana, I finally had my chance." Everyone was stunned. They gasped, realizing what this meant. As I mentioned earlier, I went on calmly, "Your luggage has already been sent to your new place. You don't have to worry. A pickup will be here soon to take you there." "Pickup? What do you mean?" my mom asked, still looking confused. "Grandma is waiting for you all. She's really excited to see you," I replied with a small smile. "Wait, Grandma? You mean my mom?" my dad asked, his voice trembling a little. "Yes," I confirmed. "I talked to her, and she agreed to take everyone in. She even told me to send her luggage ahead. Get ready because you'll be making pizzas and cleaning up at Grandma's restaurant every day." My parents and Amara looked horrified. Amara cried out, "We can't go to Grandma's. We don't want to." "Oh, really?" I replied, raising an eyebrow. "Well, you can do whatever you want, but without a house or jobs, how do you plan to live? And don't forget about that enormous credit card bill. How are you going to pay that off?" "What are you talking about?" my mom asked nervously, her face paling. "You thought the credit card was in my name?" I asked, watching her carefully. "You really should have checked. The card is actually in someone else's name." "No way," my mom whispered, her face going even paler. She took out the card and checked the name on it. Her eyes went wide as she read it. "Wait, this card is in Amara's name." "Exactly," I replied calmly. "The credit card I gave you was one I found in Amara's room. It was the first card she received when she got her first job, but she quit that job shortly after, so she never actually used the card." Amara gasped, realizing what this meant.
"What?"
"I spent way too much. What am I supposed to do now?" she cried, panicked. "Well," I said with a shrug, "since the card is in Amara's name, She has no choice but to pay it off. And all of you will need to work hard at Grandma's to cover your stay without causing any trouble. Amara kept protesting, but our parents, seeing no other option, stayed silent. They knew they were out of choices. They could only wait for Grandma's arrival. When she showed up, she took them all to her house and restaurant in Miami. Under Grandma's strict supervision, and with help from her seasoned employees, they all learned to work hard. They even shed some tears along the way, facing the discipline Grandma demanded. Slowly but surely, they paid back the $17,000 that Amara had charged to my credit card, all while Grandma made sure they stayed on track. Grandma even took a portion of my parents' salaries to help repay the expenses I'd covered all this time. As for me, I moved into a cozy apartment closer to my job, finally able to live alone again. My new life felt peaceful, and I enjoyed the quiet and freedom. I didn't have to worry about anyone else's demands or complaints. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, looking out over the city as the sun set, I felt a deep sense of relief. I was finally free from the weight I'd carried for so long. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe easily. But there was a tiny hint of loneliness, too, a small emptiness that lingered despite the relief. Just then, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and hesitated when I saw Grandma's name. Picking up, I answered, "Hello, Grandma?" Her warm voice came through the line, filled with her usual strength. "How are you doing, dears?" "Yes, I'm fine," I replied, smiling a little as I realized how good it felt to hear her voice. "That's good," she said, with a comforting warmth that made me feel like I'd made the right choices after all. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Amara and your parents," Grandma began over the phone. "They're starting to change, especially Amara. She's helping out a lot more with the work, and your parents are also beginning to reflect on things." Grandma continued, "Aurelia, I know it's been tough for you. I think I understand a little of how you feel. Family can feel like a heavy burden sometimes, but it's also something we should try to support. I hope you'll be able to forgive them someday." I listened quietly, hearing both worry and determination in Grandma's voice. She added, "There's no rush. Take your time and think it over when you're ready." "I understand, Grandma," I replied softly. "I'll take my time and think about everything." Then I hung up the phone, gazing out at the city. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the city lights were flickering on as darkness settled over the skyline. I felt a mix of emotions churning inside me, anger and sadness, but also a small spark of hope. Returning to my room, my eyes landed on an old family photo. In it, Amara and I, still young, smiled alongside our parents. I remembered the joyful days we'd once shared and felt a pang of longing. If only things could go back to those times. But reality set in, reminding me how much things had changed. As the weeks passed, my life settled into a steady rhythm. I took on new responsibilities at work, leading a project, and in my personal life, I felt more fulfilled. One evening, just as I was finishing up my work for the day, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and after a brief hesitation, I picked up. "Hello, this is Aurelia." A soft, uncertain voice responded. "It's me, Amara." Surprised, I asked, "Amara? What's going on? Did something happen?" She paused before replying. "I'm sorry for calling out of the blue. Actually, I wanted to ask if we could meet in person. There are some things I'd like to talk about." Amara's voice sounded different, softer, and more humble than I'd ever heard. I hesitated. "Why do you want to meet?" I asked quietly. Her voice, though shaky, was calm and sincere. "Big sis, I want to apologize from the bottom of my heart. I felt that just saying it over the phone wouldn't fully express how I feel. That's why I want to meet you in person, to truly and sincerely say I'm sorry." Hearing the honesty in her voice, I listened in silence. "If it's too hard for you to meet me, I understand," Amara continued. "I just want to respect how you feel." After a moment, I finally replied, "All right. Let's meet next Sunday at 3 p.m. at the cafe near the station." "Really? That makes me so happy." "Thank you, big sis," Amara replied, sounding relieved. After I hung up, I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I wasn't sure if meeting her was the right decision, but deep down, I hoped it might lead to something positive. When Sunday arrived, I reached the cafe earlier than planned. Sitting at a table, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. My heart was racing, and time seemed to move slowly. Finally, the cafe door opened, and Amara walked in. She looked different. Her face was free of makeup, her clothes were simple, and most of all, her eyes held a look of sincerity I hadn't seen before. She approached my table slowly and began apologizing as soon as she sat down. "Big sis, I am truly, truly sorry," she said, her voice full of regret. In that moment, I could sense a real change in her, and for a second, I didn't know how to respond. "Amara," I began, but she kept talking, her voice trembling as she held back tears. "Working at Grandma's restaurant made me realize how much I relied on you," she said. "I took you for granted all these years. I finally understand how hard it's been for you, always putting us first and never thinking about yourself." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, pouring out her regrets and apologizing repeatedly. She shared how she had leaned on me all those years without realizing the burden she'd put on my shoulders. She even opened up about her relationship with our parents and the valuable lessons she had learned while working with Grandma. I listened quietly, absorbing everything she said. With each sentence, the anger and sadness I had held onto for so long started to fade. Her words brought a sense of relief I hadn't expected. Finally, after she finished, I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you, Amara. I've taken your words to heart." After that, we spent hours catching up, talking about the things that had been happening in our lives and the challenges we were each facing. This open conversation felt like an important step toward rebuilding our relationship. As we prepared to leave, Amara handed me an envelope. Inside was money she had saved up by working hard at Grandma's. "This is just the beginning," she said, looking me in the eyes. "I'll keep doing my best." Holding the envelope, I felt a warm sense of pride for the person Amara was becoming. Months later, I visited Grandma's house again, where I reunited with my parents. They each offered sincere apologies, and I could see that they, too, had changed just like Amara. That evening, we all shared a family meal, a rare and comforting moment. I felt the warmth of family surrounding me once again. Though I knew I couldn't forgive everything right away, seeing my family's efforts to change gave me hope for the future. As I prepared to leave, Grandma pulled me aside and shared some wise words. "Aurelia, you've grown strong, and that strength is important. But don't forget the kindness you still carry in your heart. That's the most important thing." When Grandma hugged me, I couldn't hold back my emotions, and tears filled my eyes. I felt as if a new chapter with my family was finally beginning, and the weight on my heart started to lift.